we're done. So that type of thinking is clearly
Don't
there.
make fun of firewalls.
However, as I wrote in one of the blog posts, I think PCI isn't a cure for stupidity, and I don't think there is a cure for stupidity, kind of off the record. So if somebody would be stupid with PCI, he would probably be equally, well, not smart without PCI either. Now, from the other points, there's one point that Josh highlights that I really like, and I think that point is actually quite dangerous. And let me go and argue for the other side for a second. So, as you know, I've worked at vendors for quite some time. And so if you work at a vendor and you have 10 engineers, and you can have those 10 engineers research recent bad stuff, or you'd have 7 engineers research the bad stuff, and 3 engineers would be writing compliance reports. Now, technically, you will have something similar to a 30% drop in your loosely defined overall efficiency. Now, that's a real phenomenon, I think. And I've seen it happen, and at the time when I've seen it happen, I didn't think of it as particularly bad. But Josh kind of grabbed me by the ears and said, see, that's bad. And that's going all over the industry. So that part, I don't have a counter-argument for. I still think the overall raising people out of ignorance, sort of like balances this out, but that's still there. Question?
I keep being blown away by this because I have a perspective on the other side of it being a PCI attempts or endeavors to do is ask 1 million people to figure out the right way to do it instead of fixing the system at the center and making everything non-optional.
Yeah.
Thou shalt, and it only works this way, putting a real-time transactional system in place of a system that was designed in the 40s and 50s to end up buying pretty good. And what we need to do is stop trying to tell a million people to puzzle it out and create a business model behind, hey, y'all figure out the best way to make the good stuff happen. And instead just make the good stuff happen, not optional.
Paid by?
You know,
Yeah.
Yeah, so, you know, this is, of course, the age-old, why are we still using the magnetic stripe type of, you know, question that exists. Quite frankly, the reason we're using the magnetic stripe is because all of you like things that are cheap, and you don't like to pay more, which is going to be, there's a huge cost associated with upgrading all of the different payment terminals. But let's just move beyond that for a minute, because I think that there was, sorry, not to move beyond that, but you know, there's a couple things we have to remember that exist within this industry that are unique rather than others, right? With other industries, or at least specifically potentially with the rest of security, you never really have to worry about your neighbor, right? All you have to worry about is yourself, theoretically. You think, all I need to do is secure my organization and I'll be perfectly fine. Well, one of the problems that we see here is that when we talk about telling X million, you know, organizations, there's well over 4.8 million merchants in the United States alone, when you talk about telling one organization to be secure, it's important because what happens with credit card data is that if you decide you are not going to be secure, you're going to disclose that information, what happens is that credit card data gets used at another merchant. Items are purchased, they lose that money. They have lost the goods, now they've lost the money, they may not get reimbursed for it. So your insecurity causes harm to another person, which is why we have to address the entire problem as a whole. Now, of course, it goes back to it's too specific. And I've heard this so many times. Tastes great, less filling, right? Too specific, too vague. We can argue this indefinitely. We all agree on the same endpoint. We need to protect the payment card data. However you go about that is entirely up to you. One of Josh's key points is the no child left behind, right? It's the idea that we are going to pull everyone and make them secure somehow, right? That's not necessarily the case. If your child wants to be smarter, you simply fill out a form and say, we're going to get them to grade X because they're going to test out using these compensating controls or other methods, right? So what we're really talking about, and I think that the industry is becoming the driver, as it always is, ahead of the standard itself, right? We're seeing a lot of new different types of technologies that are being used to remove the data in the first place. Right? So I think when we talk about this, it's important to remember, it's not just us. You can't simply say, well, I'm going to secure myself, and if my neighbor doesn't want to secure themselves, then they don't have to, and they're going to face the repercussions, because they're not. I'm going to.
Question?
Mike, I think for me, though, what you're describing is putting 4.8 million Band-Aids on a sucking chessboard.
instead of actually fixing the stuff in Chesswood. To James'
Yeah.
point,
Yep.
you know, if all we're going to do is attack the perimeter of it and never go to the core, we're going to have this conversation every single year. I mean, what does your QSA tell you as a level 1 merchant? The fastest way to get PCI compliant is take stuff out of scope. And so if that's good advice for me as a level 1 merchant, why isn't it good advice for Visa, MasterCard, and all of saying, fix your stuff?
I will tell you, I'll say it's right. You know, and so from that perspective, sorry.
Repeat the rant.
Repeat the rant.
We will repeat the rant. You know, and our guy brought up a very good point, which is, you know, why are we simply trying to band-aid the problem? Why don't we fix the core issue, right? Which is the fact that data is being there, it's being retained, whatever it is. The problem with you're at least advocating the concept that there's a problem where we need to fix this fact that we have a magnetic stripe, which is age-old technology. There could be something else newer. Well, one of the problems we see, even implementing this particular standard, how many of you have trouble pushing through new technology, right? New defense mechanisms, right? Why? Because it costs money, right? And you say, well, fixing the original problem would be better than trying to secure all the data. And I think that you're right. But even now, right, there is technology out there right now that you can use for between $5 and $25 per point of sale system will remove the magnetic stripe data. It will remove any entire requirement for regulatory compliance from your area. All it does is a tamper-resistant security module that encrypts the data at the reader, sends it back to the payment processor. You never have to deal with PCI. You never have to secure the problem, right? Why aren't we implementing this? We're not implementing this because it costs money. And more so, we're not implementing it, and you have to remember this, because that data is not just used for payment processing, right? The marketing department wants it. The accounting department wants it. The data mining group and the other department wants it. Everyone wants to use this data for some other purpose. So we are misappropriating data, not securing it in the first place, and then saying, hey, don't get mad at me for storing this. I think Anton brought up a very good point. 4 years ago, almost every single, I would say almost 6 years ago, I would say 90% of the point-of-sale systems in the United States retained magnetic stripe data, full magnetic stripe data, on the point-of-sale system. That means that when you went into the Starbucks in LAX and you swiped your card, it was potentially storing that data just as it was for anywhere else. Right?
So that gets back to the fundamentally broken system. But Josh is waiting patiently, or maybe not so patiently. So let me bring him back up. Let's bring the right one. There we go. So this is one of Josh's generic bell curve graph that makes sense. And one of the arguments that you'll see about this is we've got the negligent way over there on the end, and then we have this is the classic no child left behind chart too. We're going to take care of the kids in the middle, and we're going to bring everybody forward. And the advanced people are the only people that we're really screwing with here, because we're taking all those laggards. And we do have these people that we need to help. And I would argue that the blue graph, which is probably black on these screens, is more accurate than the green one, in that it there's a big lump of people that don't do anything. And I have heard that the people who sell them network security products end up with a whole bunch of really dumb questions trying to help them out.
Like why my IDS is producing so many alerts?
How do I clean up my inbox because my IDS is filling me up with alerts?
That's right.
Yes,
Yeah,
not
yeah.
how.
Good. I wanted this to be said because this is fun. Inbox
But
rules.
there's a big bunch. I think there are more people that are more advanced. Now, this is not a simple problem, but let me bring Josh back up on here. But I do want to bring up something, and this is Bruce and all sorts of other people have said this. The entire security industry right now is in a state of that appears that the best we can possibly do is suck less. This doesn't make me happy. I don't think it makes any of you happy. Suck less is not a great option. On the other hand, if all we can do is suck less, it's our job to suck less. That's not a terribly optimistic outlook on things, but that's where we need to go. Job security, indeed. So let me get Josh back up on the screen. Let him vent for a moment, and then maybe we'll come back to Anton. And let me bring the. You're on, handsome.
I don't know about handsome, but thank you. I forgot to mention during my opening remarks that since you can't throw schmoobles at me, Mike Don volunteered that any destined for me sent.
That's his. That's Josh's. Wait.
All right. So, the nice thing about this debate.
Josh, we're going to send all these to you, FedEx.
Yeah.
The nice thing about this, and we've been doing this privately and a little bit publicly with this group of folks, is that we're not being religious about it. This is rational debate. We're going to disagree, but we're differing honestly. And one of the things I've learned from talking with Mike and gained a deeper appreciation for is that, Mike's not the devil and PCI is not the devil. It's just we all have different impressions and ideas about how to fix this problem. So I'm simply trying to make sure we expand the scope here. The No Child Left Behind bell curve or just any bell curve that Jack put up there, that's interesting. And I think one of the problems is the PCI Council and folks like Mike, they'll say, well, if you're already doing a good job, it's very easy, right? It's very easy to prove you've done a good job. Not the case. Again, I'm not being ivory tower here. We talk to lots and lots of CISOs who spend 70% of their time collecting logs or fending off auditors instead of doing their job. And we cannot forget the opportunity cost. So number one is it's non-trivial.
Stop bad mouth in collection of logs, Josh.
What's that?
Stop bad mouth in collection of logs.
Okay.
Stop bad mouth in log collection, Josh.
It's non-trivial to articulate compensating controls. In fact, some of the recent articles are showing that because of things like Heartland blaming their QSAs are being even less reasonable. We're not going to right now get into the quality management of the QSA population, although that's certainly an interesting side avenue we could talk about. I just don't think I live in a world where PCI is having a negligible impact. So at a minimum, it's a tremendous amount of work to go through the auditing process for the people who are already doing a good job. They're not getting additional value. They're just proving compliant. The bigger issue is that they're having a harder time getting budget for things that lay outside. One of the surveys I did when I was at IBM was we did a market analysis on every single security product market, and there are 70 different product markets out there for security. Something like a PCI mandate covers 12 categories, maybe 15 to 20 of those product categories. If you're in that scope, you got money last year. If you weren't in that scope, some of the more advanced things, some of the things not yet integrated into the standard, you had a really tough year. And some of these startups, they're running on fumes, if not about to close the doors. So how do those advanced organizations actually find a supply to meet their demand? If you talk to Richard Baitlick or others who are doing some fairly sophisticated and impressive incident response, the reality of Aurora and advanced persistent threats means that we need more cameras, more sensors, more logs, more analysis. We need to catch all those whispers and echoes to be able to notice this kind of advanced stuff. Anton did a great post where he said, reading blogs about APTs and PCI on the same day gives you an interesting high. But I don't see how this room can tolerate both existences and think that the digital doesn't have even the remote enough efficacy to stop someone like Gonzalez, to stop state-sponsored espionage or whatnot. We need somehow to get a balance where we can help the people who were negligent and help the people who need advanced security. And it's not the PCI Council's fault that the market's shifted this way, but the bottom line is nearly every penny last year was spent on a compliance mandate and not much more. And if that trend continues, we're going to have a hard time getting the innovation and the supply we need for the people who do need a greater level. I guess I'll stop for now.
If I could just ask one quick question, and Josh, this is a little bit out to you. You've name dropped a number of different things like APT and Aurora and different aspects, but what we're talking about here is not that complex. We're not talking about, critical issues here. We're talking about very, very basic stuff, like Anton said, flat files containing massive amounts of data. And so, one of the things that I think we have to really think about and remember is that, this is a relatively simple problem, right? And so how we go about solving it is not by saying, oh, we need to worry about all these